Hey guys, Paul Brown here with Wasson Watch Company. I'm driving, and this is about as good a time as any to talk about something that's been on my mind, which is Ukraine, Russia, the United States. This is a sort of nuanced topic. There's some elements of it that are very direct, very straightforward, very obvious, and some other elements that I think require, or at least deserve, some level of unpacking beyond the sort of short sound bites and 144 character posts that we often see. And so I just want to take a minute to discuss those. Bottom line up front, I'll kind of let you guys know where I am. I do believe that we need an America First policy when it comes to both our domestic and foreign policy. And that includes how we align ourselves with other nations, what alliances we have, how we go into those alliances, how we engage in warfare or do not engage in warfare. And so as it pertains to Ukraine, no, I don't believe the United States should be substantively involved in the Ukraine-Russia conflict at this time, because I don't believe it's in the best interest of the United States and its people. I also don't know that it would be in the best interest of global peace, of regional peace in Eastern Europe, or for the people of Ukraine or the people of Russia ultimately. So that's kind of a high level of where I'm at. But there's a lot of reasons for that, and I've frankly kind of evolved in my perspective in that over the years. A little bit of background about me: I was in the Marine Corps from 2005 to 2010. I deployed to Iraq once. I worked in intelligence. Later, I worked in intelligence at the Defense Intelligence Agency as a civilian contractor. And it was actually while I was at the DIA that Russia conducted its initial invasion of Ukraine in the annexation of the Crimea. Some of you guys may remember that. It may be something that you were not aware of at the time, or was a blip on your radar, or maybe it was this all-encompassing thing that you were glued to the TV and the internet as you were following along. But whatever the case, that was a really big step. It was a very interesting time to be following foreign policy and world events. But that also, that along with Russia's, moves that they'd made previously for South Ossetia and Georgia, started to build a pattern in my mind of aggression that I didn't feel was appropriate as an individual who thinks nations ought to recognize and respect the sovereignty of other nations. But what has changed over the years for me, before I say that, just unpacking a little further, when Russia drastically increased its level of aggression in the invasion, the sort of full-scale invasion of Ukraine that occurred in February 2022. So now, 3 years ago, what we saw was pretty drastic and pretty major. And at the time, my feelings towards Russia were very negative, and my feelings towards Ukraine were very sympathetic. Here they'd already been dealing with this incursion on their sovereign territory for close to 10 years, and they had guys fighting on the front lines, and we'd seen an improvement in their military capabilities and their preparedness. And so really Russia was also taken aback, I think, sort of caught off guard by the level of resistance that Ukraine was able to offer, and it was really sort of inspiring to watch. And so you could say that in those early days of the Russian invasion that I was really pro-Ukraine and anti-Russia, and seeing it through the lens of viewing Russia as this very aggressive expansionist nation. My thought on the issue as well was like, hey, if the U.S. can, for a really good rate of return, support the Ukrainian effort for self-defense, that in such a way that it has an outsized impact there in Ukraine, then we can have a part in deterring Russian aggression elsewhere in ways that may negatively affect the United States as well as the world, frankly. And that was my position for a while, but at some point it became very clear that, hey, we're sinking billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars into this. And whereas early on, because of the unexpected success Ukraine had in self-defense against Russia, and that they were not just simply rolled up in 72 hours like everyone expected, there was some hope that there might be some success, that there could be a culmination or termination of that conflict through a strong Ukrainian resistance. But what became clear over time is that is not the case. This is not a conflict that is going to end almost regardless of any amount of financial or even, material help from outside nations, including the U.S. There is just a size difference here in terms of population and economy, as well as geography, obviously, where Russia just massively outsizes Ukraine. And that's something about which we really ought to be realistic. Is this conflict winnable? Right? It's one thing if you're on your home turf, right, and the enemy is coming at you and you're ready to die on a hill of brass, as we might say. I mean, I'm all for that, right? Like, I'm ready to die for my home, for my community, for my family, for my homeland. But it's another thing to say, hey, we need to support one side in this conflict overseas at all costs, even to the point where total annihilation is on the table for either of those parties. I think we really need to rethink what we're doing. And so, because of those factors, and because I don't really see Russia as this sort of expansion at all costs and without any limits entity, when you really look at the history of the geographies where Russia has aggressed over the last couple decades, these are very strategically and historically significant locations. And Ukraine, the eastern portions of Ukraine that Russia has claimed, are historically Russian and have a majority ethnic Russian population in them. You look at the Soviet Union, and because it operated as effectively this massive bloc, even though there were individual nations within the Soviet Union, not only Russia, but Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and, Hungary and Romania, and on and on and on. We all know that those were being operated loosely or tightly by the Russians. And it was under the Soviet Russian system that part of the territory that had been Russia was moved over to be under Ukraine. And so think about the arbitrary lines that have been drawn to sort of create nations or create the lines around nations over the years. Think about places where that has happened, like in Africa, where we have these arbitrary lines that have very little to do with the local geography or topography or local cultures and populations that are there, and the chaos that creates. You've got whole people groups that are split up by these arbitrary lines in Africa, or that are grouped together by arbitrary lines in Africa, and that has been a massive contributor to chaos on that continent. Similarly, we have these sort of arbitrary lines that said, okay, you guys are now in Ukraine, whereas they used to be in Russia. And so saying that taking this sort of one-dimensional, two-dimensional statement that Russia's the aggressor, there is a longer history here, all right? And I think that has to be taken into account. I would rather Russia hadn't invaded Ukraine from my perspective, as an armchair quarterback on the other side of the world. But, there's a lot of other factors at play there. But the U.S. doesn't really have anything to gain by being involved. And so ultimately, what happened at the White House the other day with Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Zelensky and the other parties to that conversation. There's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions on it. Oh, it was good, it went that way. It was bad, it went that way. I would just say it was sort of inevitable that it wasn't going to go well, because you have this very high stakes conversation where the two different parties were not going to come to agreement. I don't think Zelensky was ready to accept the terms put forward by the United States. And, if that's the case, and that's the case, yeah, that conversation's not going to go well. From his perspective, everything that he is working on, everything he cares about rides on that. And, that's a big bummer to him. Likewise, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, our entire cabinet, I know, would like to find a solution, a peaceful solution, right? They hate the loss of life amongst Russians and Ukrainians. And the United States has spent billions and billions of dollars on this. And that's just, that's not a good use of U.S. taxpayer dollars. We would like to see a return on that investment. We would like to see peace come to the region, and we would like to see it occur quickly, without more bloodshed and loss of life. So expect heated conversations to continue, and expect there to be a lot of controversy around them. But what I think is really sad is that so many bleeding heart liberals who just a few short years ago were pacifists, condemning, conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan around the world, are suddenly these bloodthirsty war hawks who don't want to see an end to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and who get mad that anyone would be hard-nosed in their pursuit of peace. But you have to be hard-nosed in your pursuit of peace. And you have to know that people are going to, people who come to the table in that conversation are going to leave unhappy. And in this case, the party that's most likely to leave unhappy is the one who holds the least power. Guess what? In World War I, when the Allied forces, the British and the French and Americans and other parties to that side came to the table with Germany, they created conditions that the Germans didn't like, but the Germans had to accept surrender because of realpolitik, because that was where the power lied. And that's just the way the world works and has always worked. But it's still preferable to accept peace, even under conditions that you don't like, than to continue the senseless bloodshed of war, day in and day out. And the territory that we're talking about Russia owning is historically Russian territory. This is something that's going to create more peace in the region, but also a lasting peace long term. So those are some of my thoughts on Russia and Ukraine. I get the people. I guess I'll add a little bit. I was about to start concluding, but let me throw something out there. I know people who I like and respect who really hate this. They hate that we would not side with Ukraine. They hate that the conversation went the way they went the other day. And I'm talking about people who are generally conservative, who generally like Donald Trump and his administration and J.D. Vance and what's been going on, right? So I'm talking about like some good people. And so I get why you would feel that way. I still respect you, even if we disagree on this. But I think what can often happen, hopefully this doesn't come off as patronizing, but especially people who have been in the trenches, right? Who think people who've worked in intelligence and the military, who maybe have had some interaction with Ukrainian and other European partners on this, is you develop friendships and you develop affinities for one another, and you develop a sense of loyalty that makes a lot of sense to have, right? That this is the nature of human relationships. But what I would challenge you on is that sense of friendship and loyalty that you may have kind of towards these groups, whether it's through personal experience or through what you've read and what you've seen about partner forces, or how you've collaborated on different projects, or whatever else, is that affinity, is that friendship, is that loyalty reflective of the needs and benefits of the United States, right? Because I can like someone a lot, but is it in the best interest of the American people that my friendships and my affinities and my desire to help people, is it in the best interest of the United States to follow through on those things? Not necessarily. And that's created some really difficult, foreign policy situations over the years. Situations where individuals who were operating in good faith made promises or implied promises to allied or partner forces over the years that the U.S. did not follow through on, because ultimately the policymakers decided that it was not in the best interest of the United States or its people to follow through on them. Now, there's a lot of other things you can look at. You can look at corruption. You can look at, who gets to be the judge of those decisions. And those are conversations that are worth having. But ultimately, the people that get to be the judge of those decisions are the people who are elected to do so by the people of the United States. And sometimes we elect awesome people who do a great job of that. Sometimes we elect total idiots. More often than not, it's the total idiot one. But they're the ones that have to make those decisions. And it's not up for guys, even guys that we might respect a lot. It's not up to guys on the ground to unilaterally make those decisions on behalf of the American people. So that's where I'm at. I don't have any hate for Ukraine. I don't have any special hatred for Russia, though. Hey, they were our enemies during the Cold War for a really long time. It's kind of hard for the millennial in me who grew up with the threat of the Russian bear to just totally forget that, intellectually or emotionally, for better or for worse. And that's fine, but I'm just in this parking garage and it's getting dicey. And that's fine. We can work through that. But I would like to see a peaceful solution. I would like to see an end to the war. I'd love to see an end to all war. And we all know, or hopefully you know, if you don't know, you should know, that Jesus Christ will return one day and he will end all war. And we will finally have peace, everlasting, eternal peace. And if you don't know about that peace, if you don't have a peace already in your heart, in your mind, in your soul, you should know that you can have it. God has commanded all men to repent and to believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, who is the Son of God, who lived a perfect life, who died on the cross for your sins and mine. He was buried. 3 days later, he rose again, and he appeared to hundreds and hundreds of people who testified about him and his life, and testified later about his life before he was crucified as well. And he ascended to heaven, where he now sits at the right hand of the throne of God, interceding on behalf of those who have believed in him. And so one day there will be peace, and all of this will be behind us. It'll be forgotten. It'll be an abstract conversation, like talking about brokering peace. The ultimate broker of our peace is Jesus Christ. So believe in him. And anyway, thanks for watching if you made it this far. Hope you have a great day.